Howdy everyone, Runt9 here, and welcome to the second part of our top 10 series for One Step from Eden. This is the final part as well. If you haven't seen the first video, we did top 10 One Step from Eden artifacts on Sunday. So I'll put a link in the description below. Make sure you go check that one out as well, where we talk about the different artifacts in the game, my opinions on them, how they're build defining, how fun they are, all that good stuff. But this one, we're focused on the spells, the meat of the game. What's in your deck? What are you doing damage with? What kind of stuff are you doing? And same as the first video, I have a very different playstyle from the meta in this game, but I do think that there's going to be some pretty strong agreement with at least a handful of the spells on this list. But definitely comment below with your own top 10 list. I want to see what you guys think. I want to know how different people play this game. I'm extremely excited to hear other people's thoughts on what is definitely going to be one of my top 10 games of 2020 at the end of the year. Same goal as the Sunday video as well. If this video gets to 50 views within 48 hours, then I will do a bonus top 10 list. So make sure you click the like button. That's the single best way to help this video spread, is it gets slurped up by the YouTube algorithm and it shows it to more people based on the likes to views ratio. That's the single best way you can help this video spread and help meet that goal, so you guys get some bonus content. But without further ado, why don't we jump in and take a look at number 10. Number 10 is Sequencer. And right off the bat, Sequencer was actually a spell that I hated for a long time because I thought it's not that good. You have to worry about catching the shots to A, do damage, and B, to stack up the Trinity. But the more I play, the more I use Sequencer, the more I realize just how strong it is. It fires 3 shots at 80 damage apiece. Right there, that's 240 damage if you can land every shot. Combining Sequencer with a root just makes it that much easier, but even if you don't combine it with a root, I think the shots come out fast enough that a lot of the time you can land that 240 damage on an enemy, and some bosses definitely stand still long enough that you can pull that off. But that's not even the best part. You know, we talked about build-defining artifacts in the first video quite a lot. This is a build-defining spell. If you are doing a Trinity build, you want Sequencer 100%. Why? Because most Trinity spells give you 1 stack of Trinity. A lot of artifacts that give you Trinity will usually give you 1 stack of Trinity. Sequencer, if you catch all 3 shots, and again, I think it's very easy to catch all 3 shots, gives you a full stack of Trinity. Gives you all 3 that you need to Trinity cast your next spell. So let's say you have this in your deck with Mana Steal or Minigun. Mana Steal being a spell that does 150 damage shot straight ahead. On Trinity, cast it twice. Minigun being do 12 shots in front of you, 5 damage apiece. On Trinity, cast it twice. If you can have Sequencer appear in your deck before them, which granted is random, but regardless, if it appears afterwards, it just means that on shuffle, when those spells pop up, you're ready to go. It gives you Trinity stacks. It does 240 damage. I think that it's still very easy to catch the shots and shoot them. And if you get a double cast on Sequencer, it's an insane amount of damage, and even if you don't catch all of them, you only need to catch 3 of the 6 shots in order to add a full setup of Trinity for your next Trinity cast. I think Sequencer is build defining. I think even without Trinity, it's still very easy to use. It's only 2 mana as well, so it doesn't break the bank on mana cost. It also means that a double cast only pushes it up to 3, which is still castable by almost all characters in the game without any plus mana. I love Sequencer, and I'm glad that I turned around on it, because realizing the power of firing 3 shots that do 80 damage apiece, that also benefits from spell power. It benefits very well from double casting. It benefits from having, bonus 40 damage the bonus 40 damage minus 10 on hit is bad. There's, I think there's one that's just a flat extra 20 damage per shot. That makes it do 300 damage instead of 240. It works very well with upgrades, but even upgraded, I think Sequencer is the de facto Trinity enabler. I think that I'd rather have Sequencer than any of the other Trinity spells for trying to stack up Trinity. And your alternative is let's take Mana Steel and Minigun and a couple other Trinity spells and just have to loop through my deck to get Trinity stacked up to only be able to cast one of them with Trinity next time through my deck. I think that Sequencer is so good, and it's a perfect blend of enabling Trinity while also doing a good chunk of damage on its own. And if you are able to combine it with a root, it's that much better. And I think that's an interesting segue into our number 9. Entangle. Easily the best route in the game. Easily the most accessible route in the game. Easily the one that if I see Entangle, 9 times out of 10 I'm taking it, because there's no situation where you don't want an enemy standing still for 3 seconds where you can just hammer them with spells. Entangle in a kunai deck can almost spell death for a boss. 3 seconds of hitting Q or W as fast as humanly possible is a lot for a kunai deck. In a Trinity deck, yeah, you can get Stoplight, which we may or may not have talked about in the top 10 before, that on Trinity cast roots enemies for 1 second. This is 3 times longer of a root. 3 seconds is enough to get through a full 12 shots of minigun, or blue bullets, which is very similar but uses max mana instead of a flat 5 damage. And so many spells in the game. All the spells that cast this at 4 tiles away or 3 tiles away. Root is so good at enabling so many things in the game. Entangle on Shizo, incredible. Reason why is Shizo's basic attack fires a shot that deals damage equal to your money, and on kill, I think it gives you 10 money. Well, it makes it significantly easier to land last hits if you can just get enemies to stand still for 3 seconds. And Entangle is a cone. You've got a lot of other roots in the game that I don't remember the exact names of the spells, but you've got the one that it fires a line of swords in front of you. If the enemy moves out of that line, too bad. You've got one where swords fall on random tiles. If the enemy happens to stand under one of those swords, great. You've got claw traps, which is what Shizo starts with. Throws out 2 claw traps on random tiles on the field. Again, you also have to combine that with the starting spell Align to teleport an enemy unit onto it. You don't have to do any of that with Entangle. You point it even remotely towards the enemy, and the likelihood of them landing in the root is incredibly high. And then you hammer them with whatever spells you want, whatever attacks you want, in those 3 seconds. It is easily the best route in the game. And again, you're going to hear this term a lot. It is agnostically good. I cannot think of a build off the top of my head that doesn't want an enemy to stand still for 3 seconds to hammer them with spells. It is incredibly powerful, and there is no route in the game that even comes close to Entangle, at least in my opinion. But moving on to number 8. It is one of the best spell power enablers in the entire game across artifacts, rooms, spells, whatever. It's Focus. Purely 1 mana, gain 2 spell power for that battle. Add a double cast on top, 2 mana, get 4 spell power. It doesn't consume. It is incredibly easy to cast. If you're in the middle of spamming and you accidentally hit Focus, who cares? You just got 2 more free spell power. And if you're running a deck that is a little bit more of a slow burn, which can definitely happen in a Trinity deck, where you're trying to stack up a lot of spell power for something like Minigun, so that 5 damage per hit goes up to 7, 10, 12, 15, Focus is the spell that you want. The best part about it is the decks that benefit the most from spell power, things like Minigun, you're going to focus on convergence anyways. You can focus on a specific type of card, and you're more likely to see those cards in future rewards. Convergence is one of those types. Trinity and spell power are both in convergence. So if you focus on convergence, then you're more likely to see Focus and you're more likely to see Minigun, which is a perfect marriage. But even without that, Focus is one of the easiest cards to throw in just about any deck. I will take focus a lot of the time purely because it's so easy to cast. Yes, it does cost 1 mana, sure. Most of the time 1 mana isn't going to break the bank, and I'm always happy to see focus. And there are a lot of builds, like I will focus Convergence on a kunai build just to try to get focus in the deck, because an extra 2 damage on every kunai is still a lot, especially if I can get it upgraded for a double cast. Focus is so good, and it's just, again, it's agnostically good. Almost every deck benefits from spell power, but unlike artifacts that give you spell power, where you usually will have other choices that would be better, a lot of card rewards, the best answer is to not take anything. And if you have to either not take anything or take focus, why would you not just take focus? But if you need spell power, you are hunting for focus. I will regularly make both of my focuses convergence to try to get focus. I want to force focus to show up in card rewards because it's that impactful on so many different builds. Is it going to win or lose you a run? No, absolutely not. But can it start exponentially scaling the power of your run by adding spell power onto something that hits multiple times? Yes, absolutely, unequivocally yes. Focus is a great spell and absolutely belongs on this top 10 list, especially because it's fairly easy to come across. This isn't a legendary tier card. I think that it's one step above common, and again, I don't remember the rarity tiers, but I see focus all the time. I take it all the time. I think it's an incredible spell and absolutely belongs in the vast majority of decks out there. There's very rarely a time where I don't want focus in a deck. Speaking of spells that are agnostically good, Firewall is one of those that at common tier, I will take Firewall in decks that it doesn't belong in. It's so simple, it's so easy to cast, it hard counters Hazel. We talked about something in the last top 10, and I'm not going to spoil the last top 10 too much, but we talked about something in the last top 10 that hard counters a particular boss. Firewall hard counters Hazel because she likes to throw down stuff in the front line, whether they be turrets or those crystals that are going to shoot lasers or whatever the case may be. Drop a Firewall on it and watch them disappear. You don't have to be running an Anima deck. You don't have to, Anima being one of the focuses, just like we just talked about Convergence, that has Ice and Fire and Thunder. You don't have to be running an Anima deck. You don't have to be running a Fire deck for Firewall to be good. I've taken it on kunai decks because I'm like, who doesn't want to just make an entire line of stuff disappear? It does 40 damage plus the burning flame damage for a few seconds, and it's so good. It's only 2 mana. You don't need to double cast it. You don't need to upgrade it. You can just have Firewall in your deck and let it exist. It hard counters Hazel, and it's so good in so many situations. If you're running a deck that doesn't have an ability to kill those crystals behind hostages, congratulations, Firewall, guaranteed kill every single time. Just make sure you're 4 tiles away, drop the Firewall, crystal's dead. You're good. Without upgrading it, you're guaranteed to get that hostage saved every single time. It is the definition of an agnostically good spell. And the only reason it's not higher is purely because there are so many spells in the game that are so incredibly powerful that even with Firewall being an almost insta-take in just about every deck, purely for the utility of it, that tells you just how good the rest of this list is. And you may look at it and say, really, why would you take Firewall on anything other than a flame deck? Again, the utility of being able to make an entire column of stuff disappear without having to stand on the same row to do it, hugely, hugely beneficial. And again, talking about hostages, when you have the one where it's 2 turrets firing at the hostages, Firewall hard counters that as well. Makes you take so much less damage, makes it so much easier to save those hostages. I cannot say enough good things about Firewall, and there's nothing that could be done to nerf it. Flat out, Firewall is unnerfable unless you put it at like 4 mana. You can reduce the damage, you can reduce the duration of flames. I still think Firewall is one of the single best agnostic spells in the entire game, considering that it's at common rarity. I see Firewall almost every run, and it's almost taken in just about every deck I run. And it got to the point in the YouTube series where I stopped taking it because I felt bad about how often I was taking Firewall, that I thought it was boring about how often I was taking it. It's that good. But when you start talking about the opposite end of the spectrum, Collect Ring is not agnostically good, but it is the very definition of build defining. Collect Ring is the spell that makes a kunai build possible. There's a reason that Kunai Shizo starts with it. There's a reason that if you are looking for a kunai build, even if you don't get Acupuncture, what I consider to be the premier artifact that makes kunais apply fragile on hit for a kunai build, even if you don't get that, or even if you do get that, if you don't have Collect Ring, you don't have a kunai build. Period. There is no such thing as a kunai deck without Collect Ring. And I think I said in the last video that it did it every second. It's actually every 2 seconds. Doesn't matter. What you do is you sit there with Collect Ring and you just dodge for a bit. Wait for a bunch of kunais to stack up, and then you just spam whatever you need to kill. It is the spell, the anything in the game that makes kunai builds possible. And absolutely, unequivocally, one of my favorite spells to see because I love kunai builds that much. And legitimately, if it wasn't specific to a single deck archetype, Collect Ring would be higher on the list. I just couldn't recommend it in anything other than a kunai build, because the thing is, if you're running anything else, the vast majority of the time you don't want to have something just sitting there waiting, adding something to your deck that you're really not using much of. Most of the time you want to just shuffle through and get to your powerful spells again. But in a kunai build, you want Collect Ring. You have to have Collect Ring. It doesn't exist without it. It is the very definition of build defining, just like Firewall was the very definition of agnostically good. But the thing is, as much as I love Collect Ring, I actually don't think it's the best ring in the game. Empower Ring is. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, but hold on. Empower Ring isn't necessarily build defining for anything. It's just good. You know, a lot of things benefit from having 5 spell power. But you also just mentioned that most builds, other than kunai builds, don't just want to leave something in a slot. They want to get shuffled back through their deck. That's the thing about Empower Ring, is as long as it's sitting there, you have your 5 spell power, but once you've casted everything else in your deck, you want to shuffle. With a Collect Ring deck, you actually, most of the time, once you finish spamming some kunais, just want to sit there and wait for the kunais to start refilling. Once you finish looping through your deck with Empower Ring, you want to shuffle, cast some spells to get Empower Ring back in a slot, and then go. And let me make it very clear how powerful 5 spell power is. I always use Minigun as the example for spell power because it's the one that benefits from spell power arguably the most. I mean, you've got things like Super Minigun that fires 100 shots. And you've got a couple other things that may or may not appear on this list later that benefit from spell power. But Minigun is common tier. The basic first character that you start with, or no, sorry, basic Saffron doesn't start with it. Chrono Saffron starts with Minigun. It's just one of the basic spells that when you say, what works well with spell power, that you go to. Empower Ring literally doubles it. It literally doubles the damage of Minigun. It goes from 5 times 12 to 10 times 12. 60 to 120 damage. That goes from 120 to 240 damage on Trinity cast. If you have a double cast on it, that's now 480 damage on a double casted Trinity casted Minigun with Empower Ring. But there's so many things that benefit from 5 spell power, and I couldn't care less what the mana cost is. I couldn't care less how much damage it does. Empower Ring goes in a lot of decks, and I'm perfectly happy just casting whatever's in the other slot until I'm done, and either throwing Empower Ring out there for the 2 mana or just shuffling, saving the mana, and using it for whatever the next thing is. I love seeing Empower Ring, and there's a lot of times where I'm sad in a kunai deck that I can't have both rings because it doesn't really work to have both rings because you can't actually use it. But you could technically let Collect Ring stack up a bunch of kunais, throw it away to get your Power Ring and then go, but that's a lot of setup. But Empower Ring, you just let it sit there and it basically functions as an artifact. If you told me there's an artifact in the game that just gives you 5 spell power, I would probably put that maybe 2 or 3 on the top 10 list of best artifacts. So you're going to give me a spell that just sits there and gives us 5 spell power? It really is that good. And that's why it's number 5. But if it's that good, why are there 4 things that are higher than it? Let's find out what those 4 things are. How about something that takes spell power and cranks it up to 11? Power Saws. 40 damage base is not much, especially for a 2-mana spell. And yes, it hits 2 rows completely, which is good. You like being able to hit adjacent rows. I think that those types of spells have a lot of benefit. It's AoE damage, and it also takes a little bit less effort to aim. If a boss moves away, it's more likely to hit them. But 20 damage per spell power. Go ahead and take Empower Ring. If you fire Power Saws while you've got Empower Ring sitting in the other slot, congratulations, this is now 140 damage. And the thing is, Power Saws goes down a row and then comes back. So it's actually 80 base plus 40 times spell power. Empower Ring adds 200 damage to Power Saws if it hits twice, which I think a lot of times it moves fast enough that it can. Why don't you throw Entangle in there to root them for 3 seconds to let Power Saws hit them twice? You see why Entangle's on the list. But even on its own, it is so easy to get spell power from so many different sources. Focus adds 80 damage to this spell. Focus belongs on this list because of that. But Power Saws, there's so many ways to get spell power, and multiplying that by 20, realistically multiplying it by 40, is an incredible amount of damage. And I've regularly gotten up to 15 or 20 spell power with Power Saws in the deck, and go ahead and do the math. I'll wait. It's a lot of damage, isn't it? I mean, and again, it hits 2 rows in an AoE. Go ahead and use Power Saws against the gate with a bunch of spell power and tell me just how much damage that chunks away from the gate's health. It's incredible the amount of damage Power Saws does as you stack it up. And again, with things like Focus, the longer a battle goes on, the better Power Saws gets. Go ahead and add a double cast to Power Saws and tell me how good it is. I cannot say enough good things about it. Probably the only reason that it's not higher is because it's at Legendary tier, so you're unlikely to see it. But I also will say it's not the highest Legendary tier spell on this list. There is more to come. But Power Saws is insanely powerful. And again, there's so many ways to get spell power that I think you can look at it and say, well, yeah, but it doesn't start good. It's not agnostically good. You have to have something else that synergizes with it. I would say, yeah, but there's enough things that synergize with it that I would gladly take Power Saws on just about any build. And just like, cool, I need some spell power. Easy enough to find. I think we can get more. It's so powerful, and I love Power Saws a lot. But there's still 3 things better. Speaking of things that scale ridiculously well with spell power, how about something that adds 50 more damage for every spell power you have? Sunshine. Yes, it's 4 mana. Yes, it consumes. Yes, it is at, I forget what the tier is called, but the highest, most rare tier in the game. And yes, when it double casts, it has a sound that makes your ears bleed. But none of that matters. Right out of the gate, automatically AoE, without even having to think about it, you cast Sunshine and enemies start getting hit for 2 damage a pop. and every single spell power you add adds another 50 damage to this spell. That means that Empower adds 250 damage to this spell per enemy. Focus, 100 extra damage. How insane is that? And yes, it has its drawbacks. You only get to use it once in a battle. It does cost 4 mana. But if you're already rocking a spell power build, I don't think you care that Sunshine consumes or costs 4 mana. Because a lot of times, Sunshine is your starter and your finisher. It will finish a battle on its own with enough spell power. Again, I talked about how I've run power saws on builds that have 15 to 20 spell power. 20 times 50 is a lot. Go ahead and do the math. I'll wait. Yeah, it will one-shot things. And more importantly, we talked about this in the Artifacts episode, where I talked about how important flawlessing rooms is because of the bonus XP you get. So if you have Sunshine and you've got a little bit of spell power, you just tap Sunshine and let the entire room die. Just one tap, dead. So it does 2 times 50. Right out of the gate, it does 100 damage. You figure some of the more difficult rooms where you've got, mini boss rooms, you've got 500 health enemies. Okay, so you need to do 5 times more damage. You basically need to add another 400 damage. That's 10 spell power, that is 8 spell power, which is totally achievable. You can get 8 spell power very easily. Focus plus Empower Ring, that's 7 right there. You go add in Merit Badge, that's 1 spell power per hostage you save. Incredibly easy to stack up spell power, especially considering Sunshine kills things that makes it easy to save hostages. I mean, I cannot emphasize how good Sunshine is. I do think that if it were at a lower rarity, it might possibly be number 2 or number 1 on this list. It's just that I think I've seen Sunshine in maybe 2 or 3 runs out of the hundreds I've done. It is pretty rare. That said, if you see Sunshine, it pretty much is worth it to pick it up, even if you don't have the 4 max mana, and just get the 4th max mana later and let it be a dead card in your deck. It's that good. I will sit on the dead card just to have Sunshine in my deck for when I can get the max mana to cast it. It is so incredibly powerful, and Power Saws, at best, scales to 40 damage per spell power. This is 50 damage per spell power. Unequivocally, factually, objectively better than Power Saws, because it also doesn't require aiming. It just hits. It is that good. But Sara Cannon is better. A tier down in rarity, but still a legendary. I did mention that there was something else in the legendary tier. And Sara Cannon, it gives you Shizo's innate ability without the anchor and cast time and without having to be Shizo. Sara Cannon deals damage equal to your money. You know what limits Shizo's damage ability with his basic attack? You can't ever double cast it. Yes, it does give you 10 damage on kill, but you're going to spend a lot of time just focusing on being able to cast it to get last hits. Sara Cannon, you don't need that. And I have regularly walked into boss fights with Sara Cannon and 2,000 money. It is a spell that scales literally infinitely and can be double casted. Double casted with 2,000 money, 4,000 damage. That will one-shot literally everything except a tier 4 boss and the shopkeeper. I think there's some bosses at tier 3 that might get over 4,000. The damage is insanely powerful. And if you're able to get some artifacts that give you money, even better. But even without that, even with just playing the game normally, even ignoring that shops exist, and granted, I do think you go to a shop, spend the 60 cash to take 60 damage off of Sara Cannon to upgrade it for a double cast. So what if it costs 3 mana now? It's so powerful. It fires straight ahead, so, I mean, it sure would be nice to entangle a boss first, but when you start talking about spells that are capable of 1,000 plus damage, 2,000 plus damage, you start talking about the best spells in the game. And this is one where I know that a lot of other spells that are on this list, maybe some people do or don't agree with. I can't fathom a single person who wouldn't agree that Sara Cannon belongs in the top 10 spells in One Step from Eden. It is ridiculously powerful, and how do you nerf it? What, do you make it do equal to half your money? Sorry, yes, Shizo does damage. Shizo's basic attack does damage equal to half your money. This does damage equal to your money. It doesn't consume either, and it only costs 2 mana. It's just baffling to me how good this spell is. And the only way you can nerf it is do something like that. Make it equal to half your money. Make it cost more mana. And I still think I would put it number 2 because of the infinite scaling, because of how many ways there are to get money, and make Sara Cannon pop off. I love seeing Sara Cannon. I don't care what build I'm running. If I see Sara Cannon, I'm taking it. It is literally as agnostically good as agnostically good gets. It's just at legendary tier, so it's hard to find. But I will take it on any build, and I will be happy never seeing a shop again and just stacking up as much money as possible, letting Sara Cannon just do absolute metric tons of damage. It is absolutely incredible. But it's not number 1. Limit Break is. And I could easily sit here and talk for 20 minutes about all the different reasons Limit Break is good. And let's dissect the text here, because I think that Limit Break is one of the least noob-friendly spells in the game. Hit 4 tiles away. If you have Fragile, hit in a cross, lose 1 max mana for 20 seconds, mana cost is equal to your max mana. That's a lot to take in, so let's break it down a little bit. It fires 10 damage shots. It fires 40 of those 10 damage shots 4 tiles away. So it doesn't just sit there and fire in that one spot, even if you move. As you move, wherever 4 tiles away is, wherever your crosshair is on the field, 10 damage shots are hitting. I don't remember how many shots per second it is. I think it's like 5 shots per second. So Limit Break does last a while. But it's sitting there firing 4 tiles away, 40 shots, which is already pretty good on its own. If you have Fragile, which if you watched the other video, I talked about the different ways that Fragile can exist. And there might be an artifact on that list that makes Limit Break literally overpowered. It's easy enough to get Fragile. There are a lot of artifacts that give it, and there's ways to give yourself Fragile. There's a spell that everyone gains Fragile. Absolutely works great with Limit Break. It makes it hit in a cross, which essentially means that it hits the tile that you're pointing at, and each tile orthogonal from it. It doesn't hit diagonal, but it hits orthogonal from it. So the tile above, below, left, and right of it, which makes it that much easier to land the damage. You lose 1 max mana for 20 seconds, which for most builds, most runs, you end up in some situations where the best artifact you can take is just, all right, give me max mana, I guess. Very, very rarely have I run into situations where I have Limit Break in a deck and the max mana reduction hurts me. I think it is so easily mitigated that being the downside almost just doesn't exist to me. It doesn't even register that that's a downside most of the time. Also, mana cost is equal to your max mana. So basically, you have to wait until you have max mana to cast it, and then it uses all of your mana. Sure, whatever. That's a downside. Okay, but the thing is, that means that literally every deck can cast it. If you have 1 max mana, you can cast Limit Break. If you have 10 max mana, yeah, you have to wait to get up to 10 max mana. You better have a lot of mana regen, but you can still cast it. Doesn't matter what your deck is, Limit Break can go in it. And here's the thing. People, and I've seen some other people play One Step from Eden and don't quite understand, think that double cast on Limit Break makes it have an increased mana cost, which means you literally cannot cast it. That's not how that works. Double casted Limit Break doesn't increase the mana cost. The mana cost is still equal to your max mana, which means that it is the only spell in the game that I'm aware of that double cast has no downside on it. It literally just doubles it. And I cannot tell you how often that I will hunt through as many upgrades as I need to get Limit Break double casted, because it already, out of the gate, does 400 damage if every shot lands. If you bump it up, it does 800 damage on a double cast. And then every single spell power on Limit Break makes each shot that much more powerful, but means the entire spell overall is 40 more damage apiece. We were just talking about Sunshine making the overall spell do 50 more damage. This is only 40 more damage across the spell for every spell power, 80 on a double cast. I get that. But the thing is, I think Limit Break is so much more approachable from it's 2 rarity levels down from Sunshine, 1 rarity level down from Power Saws. And I think, especially with the fragile enablers out there, I mean, I've had Mirror and Limit Break in a run before, and it was basically the easiest and fastest gate kill I've ever seen before in my life. Because the thing is, and this is what you may not realize, is when you hit in a cross, each of those other tiles is taking the same damage that the center tile is. Which means if you cast Limit Break against the gate, it takes up the back 2 rows. Which means if you're positioned with your crosshair on top of the gate on the 3rd row, it hits 1 tile behind and 3 tiles on that row. That's 4 times whatever the damage of Limit Break is. So even at its base, it's 4 times 400, and the gate doesn't move. Limit Break, every time you cast it, is 1,600 damage to the wall. It has 17,000 HP when it starts. So even if you cast nothing else, even if you have no spell power, no double cast, 10 Limit Breaks and the wall is dead. Just on its own. There is no other spell in the game that I'm aware of that 10 uses of that spell kills, I keep calling it the wall, it kills the gate. And for me, the gate is the boss that I face most often, because sometimes I want to save bosses and kill bosses, and I'm fine just beating the gate and having that be the logical end of the run. I usually don't like dealing with going through the Eden floor or doing another loop around. I like just the gate being a hard final boss and getting through it. I like that being the logical end. And so for me, Limit Break is easily the best gate killer in the game. There is not even a remote contest. Again, if you stack Mirror on this, because here's the thing. Fragile only helps so much. Mirror only helps so much with spells that cast multiple times, because usually they have a low base damage. Sunshine only does 2 damage per shot, so Fragile only adds another 1 damage per shot. Or applying Fragile on hit. You think about Power Saws, they only hit twice. Minigun, base damage 5, so it adds 2, because I think it just rounds down. Limit Break, it adds 5 damage per shot. 5 times 40. That's 80, 160, that's 240. I think I just did the math wrong. 5 times 4 is 20, so it adds 200 damage to the spell. Sorry about my math. So, Fragile by just basic, and again, Mirror is the one that I think is the single best center. Mirror plus Limit Break is the single best synergy in the game. Period. No matter what. I cannot fathom anything else that works better together than Mirror plus Limit Break. You're guaranteed to give yourself Fragile, which means you're guaranteed to hit in a cross, which also means that every shot after the first in Limit Break is dealing 15 damage instead of 10. Add some Empower Ring on top of it, you got a stew cooking. I will pivot almost any run, unless I'm just like, all right, I use Limit Break too much, I don't want to pivot. I will pivot almost any run to Limit Break if I see it, and just start stacking spell power, and start finding ways to apply Fragile to myself. Because I think it is that good. I think it's also that fun. I love using Limit Break. I think it's a lot of fun to use. And even if you don't have Fragile, even if you're not hitting that cross, I still would put it number 1. I still think that it's that good to deserve to be the number 1 spell in One Step from Eden, even if you don't hit in a cross. The fact that the if you have fragile hidden across part is added pushes it that much further above everything else in the game that I can't see any other spell coming close. And again, we talked about the pure damage output of Sara Cannon. I think Limit Break is easier to use. I think that Limit Break can scale better. Again, 1600 damage against the wall without a double cast, without anything else, without, it doesn't matter what your money is, it doesn't matter what your spell power is. It's 1600 damage against the wall if you have fragile. Or, it's 400 damage against the wall if you don't have fragile. Add a double cast, add some spell power, see how it scales. It's just incredible. I cannot say enough good things about Limit Break. It's also just so much fun to use. I love using Limit Break. I love seeing Limit Break come up in a spell pack. It's so much fun. And you can tell by the way I talk about this stuff just how much I love One Step from Eden. But how about we recap what our list looks like? So number 10, we had Sequencer, the single best Trinity enabler in the game. Entangle at number 9, single best root in the game. Focus at number 8, the second best spell power enabler spell in the game. Number 7, Firewall, the definition of agnostically good. Collect Ring at number 6, the kunai deck. It is the kunai deck. Collect Ring is the kunai deck. Number 5, Empower Ring, the best spell power enabler in the game. Number 4, Power Saws, one of the best users of spell power, and you can see, based on the top 4, how much I love spell power. Number 3, Sunlight, again, great use of spell power, and also just one of the easiest to use spells in the game. You just click the button and things start dying. Number 2, Sara Cannon, uses your max money, scales infinitely, incredibly powerful spell. Number 1, Limit Break, most fun spell in the game to use, most powerful spell to use in the game, single best gate killer in the game. Like, it takes the number 1 in so many categories. And I'm like out of breath because I don't think I took a breath the entire time I was talking about number 1. So that's going to do it for this one. Once again, if we hit 50 views on this video within 48 hours, we're going to do a bonus top 10. And if each video has hit 48 views this week, we're going to do 2 bonus top 10s. I'm really excited about it. Thank you guys so much for the support on this top 10 series. I'm really happy that we started it. I'm having a ton of fun, and I've got so many ideas for top 10 lists. Come back next Sunday, noon Central Standard Time, for more top 10 lists. If you did enjoy this video, and I mean, if you watched this far, you probably did, the single best thing you can do to help support the channel, help spread the love of the video, is clicking the like button. That helps it get sucked up into the YouTube algorithm to show it to more people. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to see more awesome content like this in the future. And check out discord.rut9plays.com to come hang out with the community, and twitch.tv/rut9plays, streaming 5 days a week, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, Wednesday through Sunday. Would love to have you hang out over there as well. But until the next episode, I'm Rut9, and I'll see you later.